kick off, and then we can answer some questions at the back end. Michael Huggett's my name, or most people know me as Mick, for those of you that have got a few new people on the webinar today. So I've been involved in compliance now with CHD Partners just over 20 years, playing in the work health and safety, security, particular space around that time. We developed an online program called CERT, that stands for Compliance, Induction, Reporting and Training. So the whole purpose of that was for us to be able to provide an easy to manage system for organisations that are great at what they do, but often struggle with technology and also trying to ensure they meet the compliance requirements in their own organisation. Prior to that, I had 16 years in New South Wales Police. Don't hold that against me. I didn't leave because it was a corruption issue, an ICAC inquiry. I just got sick of the bureaucratic crap that went on in the cops. So I joined the police to help people, but found it's the bureaucracy you play with as time went on. So I love what we do now. Made a conscious decision to leave, and I know that every day of the week we're working with organisations where we can try and protect people, help organisations, and particularly manage and support small to medium business who just do not have the technology or just do not have the resources to do it. Today's workshop is focused on obviously electrical. So for those of you that know us, we have what we call monthly tasks. So we focus on a particular code of practice every month. And the reason for that is that particularly now, as of the 1st of July, you need to show that you use the minimum requirements of a code of practice to meet your work health and safety requirements. Now, for all of you, most of you would know that prior to that, you have legislation, which is an act of parliament, which is sort of the bones or the skeleton that basically gives a framework for safety requirements. And then you have the regulation that sort of becomes the skin that I've always explained it. It's sort of, you've got those two things have to operate together. But up until the 1st of July, I'd always said that the code of practice was like the clothes that you could put on and choose to use it and choose to pick different things that you did. Whereas now in New South Wales, as of the 1st, it becomes the minimum requirement, in essence, to make sure that if you comply with the code of practice, you've met your work health and safety compliance requirements. Or you can do more, but you need to be able to show that you've done that as a minimum. So today's focus particularly is going to be on understanding, testing and tagging electrical equipment. We're going to talk through the monthly tasks just so you understand what they are and the reason and rationale behind those. Talk about inspecting electrical equipment and the reasons why. And talk about supervisor walks and the how and the why they are so important. There's a couple of sort of reasons for that. So as I said, I unmuted everyone, but that's sort of the introduction for this morning. Is there anyone that wants to say at this point? And if the answer is no, we'll get you all to mute yourselves, or I'll get Olivia, she's supporting with the framework today. I'll get her to mute you all so we can get on. I'm conscious that what tends to happen is as we start talking, what then happens is that people start playing different things, and next thing you know, we're hearing people in the background. So cool. So what I'm about to do, I'll share my screen with you. Okay. So we should be good to rock and roll. We should be sharing the home screen. Is that right, Liv? Can we see all good?
Yeah, cool. Looks good.
Beautiful. Okay. So in short, what happens is, as I said, we have this thing called monthly tasks. So monthly tasks are those few items that we get you to make sure you do, that if you can do those, it's a policy, be a standard operating procedure or a safe work procedure that we get clients to make sure that they do month to month. To access those is simply click on My Task. So fairly simple sort of outcome in terms of accessing it. There's a couple of places you can click My Task up here or My Task down the bottom there. It'll take you all to the same place. Now, everyone's dashboard will be slightly different depending on how you use CERT, but in short, what will happen is it'll look something like this. Now, you can see that I've got AML CTF tasks, so if you're a work health and safety client, you won't see those. You will only see these other particular policy documents here, so don't worry too much about that at the moment. So the thing around this is that how we work as a framework is that, as I said, monthly task this month's on the code of practice for electrical work in the workplace from Safe Work New South Wales and also Safe Work Australia take a similar approach. Basically, one will present it and the other one will update theirs, and there'll be some slight variations depending on the particular organisation or particular state. Sorry. So what this does is we work on a framework. We have policy that's an overarching document that we get everyone to sign off on, so they're aware of what those policy requirements are. And then we have a standard safe work procedure, which is generally for staff and those people working in the main sort of part of the business to understand the safety aspect of things. And then what we do is we'll have a standard operating procedure, which in essence mimics the requirements of the code of practice. Now, as I said, we've been doing that for about 2.5, 3 years now, and it's played out pretty well because it's actually mandatory that we do that sort of thing now. So that's sort of where we sit in regards to that. So you'll see here that the electrical risk policy sort of outlines the requirements for the organisation and outlines requirements for people to look at how they commit to safety, what they do, includes things like electrical work and installations, talks about supervisor, directors and managers' roles. Now, my goal today is not to go through every single policy that we've got, but to give you a sense of particularly those of you that are CERT clients, those documents are there. And I just got off a Zoom earlier with another client where just if you need someone to reach out to help you guide us or help us guide you, we're more than happy to do that to help you work through sort of the policies and the framework. So it's just a matter of simply reading and confirming you've read the page. So what that will do is allow it that when you come down to here, you'll see that the document's actually been read, and there is a way to report on that, which we can talk about a bit later. Or conversely, for those of you that know what we're talking about, it's there, and if anyone else wants to reach out, feel free to come forward and let us know. There's also a procedure in there on safe work using electrical equipment. So remembering that safety, well, one of those requirements is the due diligence requirement from a work health and safety point of view with your organisation, whether you're a club and you have a board, or whether you're a company, you'll still have a sole director potentially, or multiple directors. You've got a due diligence requirement to make sure that you do everything reasonably practicable to keep people safe within the workplace. Now, obviously, when it comes to electrical work, often people go, it's a computer, it can't cause us any grief. Let's face it, people move things around, people drop things, people break things, they strip over stuff, and then next thing you know, we've got items that have been damaged and or misused. So don't underestimate the value of checking your electrical equipment, and that's why we're going to go through the testing and tagging process a little bit later this morning. This just gives you some guide. So the whole idea of this is that it's a general safe work procedure for working with electrical equipment. Now, we've got a whole series of these when it comes to people using, say, things in the hospitality space and using electric drills and all those sort of things. But the purpose for today is to show you that we've got a sort of a general process here for those that need to make sure that we've just got some guidance when we're using the various pieces of electrical equipment in the workplace. Again, all they need to do is come down the bottom here, click off confirm and read the page, and they've sort of gone through that sort of safe work procedure, and then they've gone through the policy. Now, we've also got in the system a toolbox tool. Now, as you know, part of your requirements from a safe work point of view and from a doing everything reasonably practical point of view is to ensure that we consult with our workers in the workplace. Now, there's two parts to that. One is around the providing guidance and information and training. And we know that sometimes it's not as simple for people and organizations to run lots of training sessions and to be out there and engage multiple sizes of the workplace. So what we've done with the toolboxes is the toolboxes are made so that people can read them and provide you guidance, or conversely, it means an individual can run the toolbox with staff. Our preference is, or what we try and get people to do, is at least get people to acknowledge the toolbox tool. So that means they get to read through it in their own time, no different to the other policy and procedure process. We've got some videos in here depending on the organisation size. So depending on whether you're in the higher risk space or depending on whether you're in the lower risk space, there's a video there for each to read. We're currently reproducing a new video that's a bit more broad across all our client base. So it means that basically a lot of the work information that's come out of the safe work procedure and the like sits in the video. So that'll apply to everybody, which should be released by the end of next week. So the whole idea is that you can provide a toolbox talk. So if everyone's actually read the document, so if we've midway through the month, everyone's actually read the safe work procedure, read the policy, read the safe work, the SWP, they should be able to then do the toolbox, and then you as a manager or supervisor should be able to then go through and run a team meeting with your staff. And the whole idea here is that there's a toolbox talk process here that allows you to go in, particular location, select the toolbox talk. Here would be electrical, obviously, because then you're not having to retype all the information that's been done. You can add your users into the system here, so those that were as part of your toolbox talk, easy there. You don't have to type names in and try and get spelling right. It always picks up from the system. If there are contractors or people from outside, you can then look at that as well, and then any items discussed. So here it might mean that you've actually asked a question. So you can see in the toolbox talk before it had some questions at the end. So you might then choose to ask some of those questions around electrical items and what people do. It allows you to document that. You can, and I'll show you this in another session later on, not today, but you can pre-plan a toolbox talk if you wish. So then that way you're not constantly updating information in your toolbox as you go. So the thing around the toolbox means that you've had a conversation around education, and then you can ask people around what are those issues and hazards in the workplace that apply to them when they're dealing with electrical items, whether it be, as I said, computers, whether it be drills, depending on your workplace. Is it people working in the kitchen, in the hospitality space? So there's a whole series of requirements from an electrical test and tagging electrical point of view. The other side is remembering that you might have switchboards and other fixed electrical items that may need to be tested, and also too, if they are damaged, they may need to be tagged out at some point, which the SOP will guide you through that in a moment. So there's the tools that sit there behind the system that make your job a little bit easy to guide you in terms of providing some evidence and getting some information to your staff and providing evidence that you've consulted with them. The next item is the standard SOP for electrical safety. Now, this, as I said, reflects the main things required out of the code of practice, and we make no apologies for that, because the reality of it is regardless of the size of your business or type of your business, you're either going to have portable items of electrical, or you're going to have things that are plugged in, with an air conditioner or something of that nature. Or if you're within, say, the hospitality space, there could be electronic gaming machines, depending on whether they're fixed, plugged in, or the like. So you've got to remember that you have a safety requirement to check equipment. So no different to if you're in an automotive space. So in automation, for example, in automotive space, and we've got clients in that area, you've got those people who work in the administrative office, and obviously they've got computers and they've got jugs and they've got microwaves and fridges that sit within those kitchenettes and the like. And then when you go outside to the workshop, there's a series of other electrical items of equipment. But what I often find is that when we talk to people around electrical safety, they forget that their general stuff, it only applies to the higher risk stuff, so construction, which is not exactly true. So you need to make sure that if people are plugging an item into a PowerPoint, and that item could cause grief. So, is the item damaged, or has someone dropped something on it? Has it been tripped over? If it's likely to malfunction, then you need to make sure that there's some testing and checking done around that. So the procedure here will go through and guide you around some of those things to be done. And the thing today, as I said, the focus today is on electrical test and tagging. Now, the purpose of this is you can do it one of two ways. You can pay for someone to go and do the test and tagging course, for the want of a better word, or you could pay for a third party like a Jim's Test and Tag. A lot of our clients use Brett Godfrey from Jim's Test and Tag, bit of a plug for Brett because he does a good job. What I like too about the fact is that they will follow up, and particularly he and his team follow up people to make sure they go back and continue to do the test and tagging. They provide a report, and the important thing around that is that we've got some clients who will use the electrician, and there's nothing wrong. Electricians do a great job, and they'll put a tag on the actual piece of item. So what happens is there's a period of time here, which I'll talk to you in a moment, but you'll generally, some of you will have seen this before, where you'll see that, the tag on the electrical item, which will give you the date it was inspected, who did it, and the date it was done, and when the next test date's due. Now, the trouble with that is it doesn't give you any other item other than the fact it's got a tag on it. Now, we know that we use tradies and the like who are very efficient, and they're very good, and they're very ethical. The issue we have is that we don't have any proof that that item at this stage was actually test and tagged. So the thing I like about some of the other organisations, or unless you've got a machine, and I know another client of ours, when we first started working with him, talked about this. He didn't have a machine, so we went and purchased a machine that actually printed out the test and tag register. So they do that themselves, and then that test and tag report is then maintained and kept in CERT to show that there's evidence that those things have been done. Now, often what happens is that we go and buy a brand new piece of equipment. We've had a test and tag already completed. We buy it, we put it in the workplace. Now, some items that end up in the workplace are either purchased brand new, and some are purchased elsewhere or bought second-hand. Now, when we buy a brand new piece of item, that's okay. We know it's brand new. We know it should be to an Australian standard. And that's when what you should do is apply this appliance's new to service tag. Now, what this just means is it doesn't mean that this will last forever. It just gives an indication that you've gone and bought a brand new piece of equipment. Okay, you put it into the workplace. The tag goes on to go, this is new. Don't stress about this. And then what you would do is you would then have it tested and tagged in accordance with all the other items that you have in the workplace as that comes up. If it's a second-hand item and you've bought it elsewhere, the theory or the practical approach is that you would get it tested and tagged as soon as possible, and practical when that's possible, okay? So you wouldn't go and put this appliance is new to service tag if you've gone and bought this second-hand in a shop, or it was something you bought from another colleague or in another business or organisation, because it's not new to service, it's been in service, and you can't be guaranteed how long that has lasted or how long that's been. So the thing we need to be aware of here is, and from the standard, and there's those of you that want to look at 3760 is the actual standard for electrical test and tagging, basically. And the thing you guys just need to remember is that, in essence, generally, equipment that, say, for example, is in a non-hostile environment. So hostile environment, I've re-added here, is one that would likely result in vibration, corrosion, dust, and the like. So if you've got electrical tools, for example, your tradies, and there's tradies out there, you're in a hostile environment, in essence, you're going to get it tested every 3 months. Okay, so a lot of our clients in the air conditioning space or electrical space, they'll get all their equipment tested every 3 months. It goes in the car, comes out of the car, gets dropped, goes back in, gets used up on the scaffolding and whatever else. And then the reality is that we just need to make sure that that's not faulty. If we've got items that sort of, you can see environment where the equipment or supply, flexible cord is subject to flexing in a normal use or range. So, for example, if that's in a area in your workplace where it might be an item such as a computer or portable computer or something of that nature, if it's going to sort of normal range of equipment, that's fine, generally every 12 months, okay? Now, if you then, as I said, you get to that sort of area where it's certainly not subject to flexing, so it could be a computer that's fixed in a location or space, okay, or some other piece of equipment in your workplace like your photocopier that doesn't move, then that only needs to be tested and tagged every 5 years. So the important thing around the testing and tagging is that to check to make sure it's electrically okay. And the important thing is to remember, if there's a fault and it shorts, the person doesn't get electrocuted. So you would have seen too, the other thing is around having RCDs in the workplace, so recurrent residual devices. The purpose of those processes are to have them in the system so that if there is a fault, it will kick out the circuit board. Now, having an RCD doesn't necessarily mean that someone's not going to get a zap. What it just means is it won't be hopefully enough to kill them. And what it will mean is it's just enough to stop them. You'll get a zap, but as I said, that's where it'll stop. So you need to make sure not only are the RCDs, not only are your equipment test and tag, your RCDs and also your electrical boards are checked at the same time. If you have electrical equipment that needs to be tagged out or equipment that is faulty, so you need to make sure that you have these test and tagging processes here. Now, a lot of you on the Zoom today, on the call today, won't ever have to worry about these. If you have a electrical work or a switchboard and someone comes in to do some work on that, that means that they will put a tester out, a service tag on it. If that's the case, you make sure you do not remove that tag. There's a process in the system to make sure that only authorized persons can do that. Don't go and take a tag off just because you think, I need to use it, I'm going to pull it off and off we go. So the thing might be is we've had an item test and tag, for example, it's got an issue and needs to be fixed or it needs to be repaired. The out of service tag would go on it so that people know not to use that until it's been done. So really critical for that to make sure you look after your people. Now, the other side of that is, so that's the test and tagging. So that's that electrical aspect. Now, remembering that, 3 months, 12 months, 5 years is a long time between having something checked and the like. So the other thing to remember is what you also need to make sure you do is from time to time is do an inspection of your equipment. So again, it might mean that we're just going to have a simple, the monitor, or we've got something that sits in a particular area that's a little bit more out of in an area that might be damaged. And then what we're going to do is we're going to conduct a simple check. Now, in this case, the condition is all okay. Some of these things are ticked into place just to save you a bit of time and effort. But what it simply means is if we're talking about, for example, a monitor, it doesn't have doors and it doesn't have hinges. It doesn't have a stand. It doesn't have buttons. Yes, it's applicable electrical. It'll ask you to check a few things. Okay, we do those check. Take a photo. I'm a big believer that a picture tells 1,000 words. So if you have an item, it's been checked, take the photo, because if someone gets hurt down the track, what it means is that you've got the evidence that it's all okay. Okay, you've got the evidence that you've checked it, and it just so happens that something else has happened in the meantime. It might just be enough to mean that, if someone's injured, that you won't have a significant issue that's going to cause you any grief from a safety point of view. So that's the test and tagging. That's the part about making sure you do an inspection of your equipment. So again, insert, we've got various different inspection checklists that range for small, large plant and the like. But in terms of equipment, it's a fairly simple process. The important thing is that you show that you're checking your items, that it hasn't been dropped. As I said, that a cable, for example, hasn't been had something put on top of it and hasn't got a cut or something like that in it. Really, really important to make sure that you get those things sorted. So that's the test and tagging. There's a couple of articles we have that sit on the CERT website, so we'll send those out to you today as well. I did an article last week in regards to LinkedIn. If you want some additional information, please feel free to contact us and we will send that out to you. So if we know our equipment's test and tagged and we know that it's reasonable, it's safe as far as we know because it's not damaged and the like, one of the other things we need to make sure we do is that we need to make sure that staff are aware about how to use the equipment. So it's one thing to assume that we know someone knows how to use something. The other side is what we call a supervisor walk, or for example, a safety walk. Now, the reason we call it a supervisor walk and not just a safety walk is it can be used for a multitude of things. We not need to assume that someone knows what they're doing. So the big thing we have, or one of the issues we have today, is that we assume because someone was an electrician or because someone was a fitter machinist or because someone's worked in another office, they know how to use an item of equipment or plant. The whole concept of a supervisor walk means that we check to make sure that someone's actually doing or using the equipment in the way that it's meant to. Now, the supervisor walk's not a workplace inspection. It would be more about moving up to a person or having a time and arrange with them And what you'd let them know is, look, we're going to have a bit of a chat about how you'd use this particular item, or how you'd use the drill, or how you'd use the photocopy, for want of a better word, or how you'll use the electric jug. Now, I know this sounds very silly, or the toaster. We have people come in from overseas, or people who are young, may never have used the toaster before. And again, we know the toast gets stuck, and the first thing someone thinks is, I'll put a knife down there, okay? Now, I know that we often go, who wouldn't know that? In this day and age, just be aware that we need to make sure that people are aware what to do and what not to do when it comes to using equipment. So the whole idea of the supervisor walk means that you would pick a time, you go for a wander out in the workplace, you might walk up to someone, have a copy of a safe work procedure or a procedure with you, and just continue to have a bit of a conversation with them about how are they doing the task. Now, as you can see here in the supervisor walk, particularly insert, there's some guidance here, and then there's also a help page within the system as well that talks about how to do supervisor walks. So the thing here is about this is that we try within the system to make it as easy as possible for you to do, to find, to get the records when it comes to anything to do with safety. So don't underestimate the value of having a safe work procedure, having the person signed off on that, making sure you've done the toolbox talk, and then the supervisor or the safety walk is just that sort of last line of defense where we've actually checked in with people along the way to make sure they know what they're actually doing. And it's a very simple process, as I said. When it comes to the supervisor walk, it would be a matter of checking the location. What's the task observed? Using a particular item of equipment. Okay, you can notify the supervisor by checking the person here. What's the observation? Observation 1, could see the person do X. Was it safe? Yes and no. And then if they were safe, talk to me about how well they did. If it wasn't safe, talk to them about what they didn't do. Don't criticize, just guide. So the important thing we need to make sure we do is, and particularly now with those issues around psychosocial hazards, is tell people what they're doing, let them know why they're doing it wrong. The purpose of having the safe work procedure or the procedure there at the time means that you can guide them. It's not your philosophy. It's like when I talk about safety, my views of safety are not my views. They're about what the codes of practice say, what the legislation says. Like many of you, like today, I jump onto other webinars with Safe Work Australia, Safe Work New South Wales, and where I can, I'm always trying to get updated information about how is it best to do something and how do we keep people safe. Because that's how I see our job, and my job is to provide the guidance. I can't make you do, but I can try and tell you the things that you should be doing, guide you along those ways. If you're not sure, come back to us. We'll have a discussion around what works best for your industry. And if it's not standard, we'll help you seek out to get other expert advice in terms of trying to make sure that we can manage things more appropriately. Okay, so supervisor walk or safety walk, again, what allows you to do is, in this particular situation, you can look at a couple of things at a time, so you can make a couple of observations. Again, I'm a big believer, a picture tells 1,000 words. If you've had a conversation, person's happy, take the photo, shows that you were there, and it provides evidence for what you do. So in terms of, in sort of, I suppose, summary, we've spoken today about the reasons for policy, reason for your toolbox talks. We've talked about your safe work procedures, the need for test and tagging. Now, if I'll show you, I'll show this report to you. Stop sharing just in case, because sometimes it plays silly buggers. Okay, so you should be able to see here, like I mentioned earlier about the test and tagging report, here means that you can see the item that was checked, the date, the result, and the status, okay? So everywhere is a little bit different in terms of how they provide that, but I can't underestimate the value to you in having the records to show that you have items that have been tested and tagged. As I said, I'm not saying don't trust someone else, but what I'm alluding to is that get that done, and if you've got the reporting, it just means that you've done everything reasonably practicable to make sure that you'll be able to show to the regulator or to an investigator if something goes wrong in the workplace. So that's today's webinar on electrical test and tagging. The items you need to make sure you're aware of. Don't underestimate the value of checking items, making sure you get your test and tagging done electrically and done correctly, and the supervisor walk to make sure staff are aware of what to do. If you've got any questions, let me know. If not, I thank you for your time. For those who are on the webinar and others that have indicated to us that they couldn't make today, they'll get a copy of the webinar sent to them. And if you need any further information, reach out. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.